Hey everyone, it's Rob B here with Rob D, and this week I'm going to make all your dreams come true.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. In case you don't know, we run a company that buys more than £100 million worth of property for our clients every year. You can find out about that at propertyhub.net/invest. And whenever we talk to our clients, the first thing we talk about before we talk about property or locations or anything else is their goals. And if you're not clear on your goals, as many people are not, we've got a fantastic framework to share with you. Time for our news story, and what could it be this week other than tariffs? The story that has dominated the last couple of weeks. They're on again, they're off again, it's 5D chess or it's a total shambles depending on how you look at it, and this is being recorded a couple of days before the episode goes out, so who knows what the situation will be by the time you're listening to this. But broadly so far, it's been good news for property investors, not least because you can't see the value of your investment swinging around all over the place, but also because it's put downward pressure on mortgage rates. And really, it's one of those bad news is good news scenarios. Because of this trade war, the prospects for growth are now lower, there's risk of a recession, and therefore it's more likely that the Bank of England will cut interest rates. And the general outlook for interest rates over the next few years is perhaps lower than it was. It's now thought by the markets that there will be 3 rate cuts this year rather than the previous 2. And that means that various lenders have been cutting rates. The building societies and some of the specialist lenders were first to move, but Barclays then became the first of what's called the Big Six, the biggest lenders, to make cuts to their range. Now, what this will mean longer term, we don't really know. It's possible that as a result of this, inflation will pick up as a result of a weakening pound, and that would mean that all else being equal, you'd expect interest rates to go higher. But if you are in the process of arranging a mortgage right now, or you will be doing so soon, then for now at least, it's good news.
Rob, I want to jump in our time machine today because I want us to go back over one of the most important episodes that we've ever covered. And interestingly, one of the episodes that people keep talking to me about, even though it's been multiple years since we recorded it. And that's an episode we recorded on Dreamlines. And Dreamlines are an incredibly powerful tool that most people won't have heard of. But once you put this in place, can make a huge difference, not just to your property investment life, but your whole entire life.
Yeah, something that we've spoken about ever since the start of this podcast way back when is the importance of having clear goals. And a Dreamline is still one of the most powerful ways to help you get clear on your goals. So let's jump into that time machine. Let's find out what it is, what it's all about, and stick around to the end because we've got something to share to help you put it into action as well.
Let's move on to our topic of the week, which this week is creating a property dreamline. Basically, it's a particular way of approaching goal setting, which is something that we talked about back in episode 15, 10 episodes ago now. It was a really popular one. A lot of people like that. And so what we're going to do with this episode is explore a framework that helps you to set your business goals and your property goals based on your desired lifestyle. So we've taken this concept of dreamlines, which I'll explain in a minute. We've updated it for property. And we've put together a spreadsheet to help you record some of this stuff. And we're going to talk you through that with examples during this episode. So the spreadsheet you can get from the show notes at thepropertypodcast.com/25. You don't need to have it in front of you. You don't have to have seen it for the purposes of this episode. So have a listen and then maybe go and check out the spreadsheet later if you're interested. But let's start explaining what a dreamline is. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good to me. We can't take the credit of coming up with it, can we, Rob?
We cannot. So the term of dreamline first came from Tim Ferriss. And we've got a book, which I'm sure a lot of people have read, called The 4-Hour Work Week. If you haven't, then I definitely recommend it. He coined that term. And then it was updated recently by Dan and Ian from formerly the Lifestyle Business Podcast, now the Tropical MBA Podcast. In their episode 40, which we're going to link to as well, they updated this concept and we're going to sort of take it even further from there. Dan and Ian, as with most things in our lives, were the inspiration for this episode and sort of made us revisit this dreamline concept and realize how relevant it is for property as well. We should really sort of say what it is, I guess. And a dreamline, I think the definition is, it's a list of all the things you want and what it would cost you both upfront and per month to have those things. And what it does is encourages you to think in terms of monthly cash flow. So you're not thinking about how much money you need in the bank or anything else. You're thinking about how much money do you need each month to have the lifestyle you want. And it also forces you to specify in exact detail what this lifestyle is that you want. And when Tim Ferriss came up with this, he was using it to show that the dream lifestyle that you want might actually cost less than you think, especially when you break it down to the level of daily spending. And in the book, there are loads of examples about the kind of life you can have in various parts of the world without having to spend that much money. For our purposes, we can use it to work out how property will help us to get to where we want to be. How this ties into goal setting is that if you're struggling to kind of set what your goals should be in property, it's like, okay, well, let's use this Dreamline concept to come up with the lifestyle that we want and how much it's going to cost us. Then we can come up with our goals to help us end up with that lifestyle that we want. So that's what a Dreamline is.
Now we understand what a Dreamline is, we need to put it into practice. So the first thing we need to establish is timeframes. So how long is it going to take for us to achieve our Dreamlines? Now, Tim Ferriss and Dan and Ian talk in very short term. Okay, they talk in 12 months, 6 months, which is great. But when we're doing a property Dreamline, we know that the real wealth in property is unlocked over the long term. So what we advise is you do 2 sets of Dreamlines: a short-term Dreamline, which could be 12 months, and a long-term Dreamline. It's up to you. It could be 5, 10, 15 years, whatever suits you best. But do both, because you will be able to achieve a lot in 12 months. But you will also be able to achieve a lot more going forward long term as well. Make sure when you go through this process that you set 2 Dreamlines up, one short term and one long term. And as Rob's already said, you've got the spreadsheet on the show notes that you can go and use to do this.
So let's get into, in each of those timeframes, what kind of stuff are we putting into this Dreamline? Well, it's made up of 3 different components. It's having, being, and doing. It's all quite self-explanatory. Having is things that you want to own. Being is how you want to be as a person, and tied into that are the things that you need to specify what you need to do to bring that about. If you say, I want to be able to run a marathon, then you're going to need to do certain things along the way to make that happen within the time frame you're talking about. And then the final one is doing, which is what you want your day-to-day life to be like in terms of the activities you do. So doing could be related to certain hobbies. It could be about the kind of work you do, or anything at all to do with how you spend your time. So between having, being, and doing, you kind of cover off everything about your lifestyle that's important to you. So in the spreadsheet, there are 5 different slots for each of having, being, and doing, in which you fill in the description of what it is and the cost that it will cost you per month and any kind of upfront cost associated with that as well. And that will help you work out how much money you'll need to have this lifestyle happen. But Rob, we should really give some examples to make this more concrete, shouldn't we?
Sure. So if we look at the short-term Dreamline to begin with, although 12 months might not sound a lot in the terms of a property portfolio, there's actually things you can implement quite early on. If you live at home and you currently do all the cleaning, the gardening and the ironing, then one of the things that you could have is to have a cleaner. You could have a cleaner once a week. What you would do is put that in your Dreamline. Then what's the cost? Is it £10 an hour? Okay, so if it's £10 an hour, put that in. So now once a week, £10 an hour, over a month is about £40 a month. That's how much it's going to cost you now. If you do it 2 hours a week, then it's £80, but you get the idea. So you could have a cleaner to allow you to free up some of your time, or a gardener, same sort of thing. So that's having, but there's being as well. There's other things you can achieve in 12 months that you can see yourself doing.
For example, say that I wanted to be fluent in French. I travel a lot. I always feel really bad that I can't speak the language. So let's just sort of say I want to be fluent in French. Then there are different ways of going about this. So you could say, all right, well, I need to get a tutor. I need to get someone to personally tutor me for 2 hours a week. And that's going to cost me £200 a month. In that case, I'd put that under being in the spreadsheet. I put being fluent in French. To make it happen, get a tutor for 2 hours a week, and the monthly cost, which would be, say, £200. Alternatively, I could say a far more effective way of doing that is going to be spending a whole month in France, not working, just doing intensive lessons all day. That wouldn't have a monthly cost attached to it, but it would have a one-time cost. So I'd have to add up the cost of my accommodation, my lessons, everything else while I'm in France for that month, and also include in that the cost of the work I'm missing out on because I can't work during that month. So if I do that, then I would put that into the spreadsheet as a one-time cost. So that's 2 different ways of approaching the same thing, but that's one kind of being goal. So this being section is to do with how you want to be as a person. So I suppose that's the self-improvement section.
Yeah, and so that's the short term. And then longer term, throw some big goals out there. think about your life. Unless you're a Buddhist, you only get one crack at this. So, think about how you want your life to pan out in 10, 15, 5 years time, whatever, what you want to be doing. If everything's worked out well, start listing it. That's the whole point of the Dreamline, especially when you go for the longer term, is put those big reachy goals, the things that scare you a little, because the whole point of doing it is to track a way of getting there. So it doesn't become a dream, it becomes a process. So don't worry if your long-term goals scare you because you think they're not reachable, because actually, as humans, we tend to overestimate what we do in the short term and underestimate what we can do in the long term. So when you go for your long-term goals, throw some stuff out there. Now, if that, it depends on the individual and who you are and what you want. If that's having a yacht, then, have a yacht. Maybe it's the boat that we talked about earlier in the episode. If you want to have your own boat to live on as well as your home, then great. That's fine. It could be spending 6 months of the year traveling around the world. Rob does it already, and you don't have to wait 10 years to do it, but that might be a choice for you further down the line. And then it may be that every day you've got a personal trainer every single day in your life. It depends. It's not for Rob or I to tell you what goals to set, but it's just to get you thinking about what's possible. But if you're struggling to come up with some dreams, short-term and long-term, Tim Ferriss really sums it up well on a way of getting rid of that mental block. Okay, and what he says is list up to 5 things you dream of having, included but not limited to material wants. So a house, car, clothing, etc. Being, so it could be a great cook, be fluent in Chinese, etc. And doing, so it could be visiting Thailand, tracing your overseas roots, racing ostriches, whatever, in that order. So go through and list 5 things, and that's a good way to start. But if you're really struggling, consider, and this could be for the longer term goals, consider the question, what would you do day to day if you had 100 million in the bank? If still blocked, fill in the 5 doing spots with the following: 1 place to visit, 1 thing to do before you die, a memory of a lifetime type of thing, 1 thing you'd like to do daily, 1 thing you'd like to do weekly, and 1 thing you've always wanted to learn. If you start with that list, then that will probably get the creative juices going for you to fill out the other sections.
And I think you should really give yourself permission to go nuts with this. You be as ambitious as you like, as you say, and be as selfish as you like as well. The value in this is it forces you to really think about what you want your life to be like, and then work back from there. And that's a really, really valuable thing. If you just do this exercise, you'll be ahead of 95% of everyone else who never thinks about what they want their life to be like and just lets their life happen to them. The first step really towards getting what you want is to specify what you want. And that's what this exercise really helps you to do. And so then having done that, it's just a case of working back and figuring out, well, okay, that's the dream. Then how do I do it?
Okay, so the next thing to look at is how are you going to do it? So it's all great having all these goals and aspirations, but you need to then, as it's called the property Dreamline, relate property directly back to it. So you need to create a plan to hit those targets. Now, the short-term plan, it should be pretty easy, because if it's just get a cleaner or a gardener and start taking lessons in French, then that amount per month isn't going to cost you so much. So you can look at a property cash flow, realize what it's going to net you each month, and you may allocate a proportion of that to your life, to enjoying it. Yes, it's good to reinvest the money you earn, but don't feel like you can't start enjoying your life for the hard work you've done up front. If having a cleaner or a gardener or learning French would make a big difference in your life, then do it. So the short-term goals are pretty easy to plan for because you can see it in 1 or 2 properties. It may be save the money to invest, and then once you've invested, make sure you get a return of X amount, and then that'll allow you to achieve the goals. Then great. The short-term goals should be easy, and most people could do that. The longer-term goals, you may need some guidance, because if those numbers are quite big and quite reachy, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, then you may need to put a more complex plan together. Rob and myself are more than happy to do that. It's what we do on a daily basis. So if you're thinking about longer term goals, then get in touch. We give our time for free. You can pay us in 5-star reviews, but we'll give you our guidance. That we're more than happy to do that. So get in touch and we'll guide you on the longer term goals. But why not, before doing that, get your goals together? So when you come to us, you know exactly what your future life's going to cost you. And then it'll be a lot easier for us to guide you from there.
That's something that if you go through the spreadsheet that we've put together, it'll really help you with, because you can put all the different things in there, put in the monthly cost and the one-off costs, You can put in your expenses as well. And what you're going to end up with is a target monthly income. So it's like, to have this kind of dream lifestyle, this is what it's going to cost me. And then if that number looks really scarily high, you can play around with things a little bit, or you might be pleasantly surprised. And then that can guide you as you put together your property goals and work out what you want to do. There's also some steps in there. So really, once you've got these goals, it's a case of going, okay, well, what can I do right now? And what can I do tomorrow? What can I do the day after? And how can we keep working towards this goal? In the short term, it really gives you a kick to get started. Then longer term, as Rob says, it gets a little bit more complicated. The important thing is it's working out where you want to be in the long term and why. And having that reason, going, okay, this is the lifestyle I want to have. And so this is what I need to do in terms of property. It means that you're not going to fall into the trap of just acquiring hundreds and hundreds of properties for no reason and not knowing why you're doing it. Or you're not going to give up in 6 months' time because it's hard work. Once you've got this vision, it becomes much easier to stay focused on that goal and do the things in the short term that might be pretty difficult, because you know that it's going to be worth it and you know that you've worked out the numbers and it's all going to pay off.
Oh, Rob, it was fun going back in time. Our voices were so young and handsome back then, and so full of optimism.
I know.
What's changed? Well, you know what hasn't changed, Rob, is our ability to keep giving more value. And you've created something quite wonderful for this episode.
Yep, hopefully as a result of listening, you are sold on this concept. This is something that you want to block out a couple of hours to do, and it's well worth it for all the reasons we've spoken about. And to make that process really easy for you, we've put together a spreadsheet that you can use that guides you through the whole process and does all the calculations for you. So head to the show notes and you will find a link to where you can grab that, of course, for free.
Well, I've just checked, Rob. Our time machine is broken for the time being. So we'll be back next week in the present with a new episode. And we'll be back in the Sunday Times answering your questions there. And back with Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. So loads of content like this to look forward to. So until that takes place, take care, have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.